Hard act to follow, I reckon, but I think our next panel is up to the challenge. To tell us more about challenging traditional business models to attract investment, I'd like to ask our speakers to make their way to stage for our next panel titled Beyond the Lighthouses, the Emerging Innovation Precincts. Lindy Deitz, Chief Executive Officer, Campbelltown City Council. Professor Barney Glover, AO, Vice-Chancellor and President, Western Sydney University. Glenn Matthews, Chief Executive Officer, Sydney Motorsport Park. Professor Andrew Parfitt, Vice-Chancellor and President, University of Technology, Sydney. And our Provocateur, Brian Tyson, Managing Partner, SEC, Newgate, Australia. Please make them welcome.
Thanks, Faith, and thanks to Chris and everyone from the Western Leadership Dialogue Forum. I'm delighted that SEC Newgate is a proud sponsor of this very important and exciting summit. Well, welcome everyone. We've got a short amount of time here to canvass a really interesting topic, and obviously some great panellists, so let's get straight into it. With the starting premise that emerging innovation precincts have challenged traditions and embraced a new way of doing business. How is this bold approach working in attracting interest and investment, and what are the precincts delivering in terms of social health and community outcomes, not just the economic ones? Let me start with you first, Glenn. The old Eastern Creek site, when I was in government many years ago, that was called a white elephant. Now it's called the Sydney Motorsport Park, and I know you have a vision for it to be like Silverstone in the UK. How's it all going?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And I must firstly say what a great time to be from and a part of Western Sydney, and it's really great to be here today. Just to put it in context, I'd just like to say that this year the Australian Racing Drivers Club, or the ARDC, is 70 years old. And member number 4 was Sir Jack Brabham. Now, Sir Jack Brabham is the only person in history that designed, engineered, built and drove and won the Formula World 1 Championships. That will never happen again, I don't think. And so to say, I think we can say that we probably have innovation in our veins, in the DNA of the ARDC. So about 5.5 years ago, I just want to provide some context. So about 5.5 years ago, as part of developing our innovation and education strategy, we did take a trip to the UK, and we went to Oxford Brookes University, we went to Milton Keynes, and we went to Silverstone. And it was an amazing trip, and we looked at what they had there, and what we found in Silverstone in particular is that they had a UTC, or a University Technical College, on site. And that was fantastic, because the takeouts we got from that was that it was an industry-led curriculum. The head of that technical college wasn't an educator. He was ex-McLaren. And so there was an example straight away that the students there were getting the latest information and being taught the latest innovations for motorsport. We also found at Silverstone that there was a great business innovation park there, and that Silverstone created, I guess, the honeypot effect. So the two takeouts for us were the honeypot effect, and also that was an industry-led sort of education. Then we come back to Australia and said, well, what could we do here? And we, I guess, created what we're calling the Australian Motorsport Innovation Precinct. And whilst our first building starts construction this month, we didn't wait for the building. We've actually already started on that journey 5 years ago, and we have a number of organisations already working with us on site. Our vision is to become a world-class, dynamic-based destination for innovation in motorsport, and we, of course, will cover precision engineering, race team development, mobility studies, safety and medical, and of course, sustainability. I just want to talk about sustainability. I'll just take 2 more minutes.
You're right, I was going to ask you about sustainability.
Just about sustainability. Last year, the world governing body of motorsport, the FIA, created a metrics called the Circuit Sustainability Index, and they ranked 96 circuits in the world. And there's 3 pillars to the sustainability. There's financial sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. And out of the 96, we were the number 1 ranked circuit in Australia, and we're in the top 30 in the world alongside Silverstone. It's interesting because we talked a lot today, and I've heard a lot of speakers today talking about telling your story, because there's lots of stuff that we do, and we have a phrase at work called making the invisible visible, because there's lots of stuff that we do that we don't tell anybody about, and we're about to do all of that. And I guess just in closing, our aim is that we'll be in the top 5 in that index within the next 2 years. And so we're out there to tell our story and and shine the light on Western Sydney.
Thanks, Glenn. But motorsports, it's a small sector of the community. It's emissions intensive, sustainable outcomes. How do you do it? And beyond benefits for the motorsport industry, where does the community benefit?
Well, I think community benefits in a lot of ways. If we look at, first of all, some of the studies that we're looking at in terms of sustainability and the different energy sources and power, whether it's electric vehicles, solar power or hydrogen power. And I think we can see that motorsport has a history of providing innovation for the wider community. Disc brakes, for example, is just one of those examples. And I think that motorsport will help, improve the efficiency of alternate power, for example, and getting away from fossil fuels.
Thanks, mate. Now to Lindy, I know it's early days out at Campbelltown, but you see, we're talking about innovation precincts. They seem to be popping up all over the place. Why Campbelltown? How's it going there? And what's unique about what you're offering in Campbelltown?
Why Campbelltown? Because it's the most amazing place on the earth, naturally. But apart from that, we are one of the metropolitan city centres of the Western Parkland City. So we play a very critical role in supporting the broader region and the growth, mainly because we have existing infrastructure and wonderful existing institutions within our city. In terms of where we're heading and what we're doing, we've probably got about 3 to 4 innovation precincts on the boil. The most advanced one is our CHEP project, which is we're in partnership with a group of people to work on health and education. Our precinct is quite a large physical space, so there's lots of opportunity to create place, to create jobs, to attract innovative business, and to make the most of the existing stakeholders that are there, which are the wonderful Campbelltown campus of Western Sydney University, TAFE New South Wales, Campbelltown Hospital, and many, many other services that are within that precinct. So it's a natural precinct already. It's about making the most of that and creating it into a place where business wants to invest.
But do you find yourself, what's your unique point of difference? Why are you different to, say, Liverpool? Do you find it a competitive space?
No, it's not a competitive space. This is an old wives' tale, I think, that people like to create because I think competition is much more exciting than collaboration. But we in the Western Parkland City, I guess, through the City Deal journey, had to create a very strong bond with 8 local government areas. Now, if you could imagine having multicoloured politicians, and I mean every colour of political party you could imagine, you've got 8 very diverse and different local government areas. We complement one another and we work really hard to ensure that what we're doing is enabling the benefit of the other. Now, I remember in the early days people saying, health and education precincts, think of something new. Well, what people don't understand about health and education precincts is that we all have our specialties. That's the way health works. And Campbelltown has its specialties that complements. Why Campbelltown? Campbelltown is the last fringe metropolitan council within that border. So we play an incredibly pivotal role, and with the new 6 city models, our great and important connection is with the Illawarra. So the growth is so significant in the Western Parkland City, there's plenty for everyone, trust me.
All right. Now, Professor Parfitt, you've got, the UTS got their finger in plenty of pies in innovation precincts. What do you see as the key elements that for innovation hubs that need to be addressed?
Sure. So just let me reflect a moment on universities, because in a sense they provide a kind of model for how some of this might work. And we might think of universities 20, 30 years ago of academic staff, teachers in their offices or in their laboratories doing esoteric work disconnected from the world, and students in the classrooms learning, and they might get out and about during a work placement occasionally. It's not like that now, and certainly not like that for design campuses like we have at UTS, which I'll come briefly to Tech Central in a moment, because that's another one of the key innovation precincts. What we have at the moment at any point in time, we have 500 student startups. We have 700 industry partners around some of our key programs in creative intelligence and innovation. We have industry partners on campus working alongside some of the key unique facilities that enable them to power their businesses. That's the sort of campus environment that we have. And so if you're looking for a vision for the precinct, that sort of vibrancy, porousness, connectedness, community really is what drives the innovation agenda. And that's where the focus essentially for the Tech Central precinct, which is down around our campuses. At the other end, we have the University of Sydney, collectively $5 billion worth of investment, 100,000 students, 20,000 staff, a hospital precinct at one end, key industries like Atlassian and accelerators like Stone and Chalk and others coming in to sort of just continue to fuel and expand that, particularly around digital empowerment. So for me, it's not just about the place. The place is important, right, because it provides the magnet, but it's about how that talent comes together and how it actually engages and connects.
They all sound like really exciting places to live, work and develop and innovate, but are the outcomes really achieving what the hype's suggesting?
Yeah, look, I think if you measure the impact of innovation and you see what things like proximity, structure to engagement between industries and universities, and even the resource that's available through early engagement with students while they study. We talk about skills shortage, but if you have students who are ready to go, if you like, from their studies into some of the jobs of the future, that really enables us, particularly incumbents in those precincts, to actually start to get a real kick start. But it's more than just about the precinct alone, because the whole network of precincts that we have across the state also provides opportunities. I'm sure Barney will talk about the AMRF and what's perhaps a decade away out at the Aerotropolis and the plan to get there. But in some form or another, having these aggregations of talent focused on particular areas but highly connected is a real way to get the value add from those communities.
Is there a different approach from, say, the inner city to Western Sydney, and you're getting the same kinds of support from stakeholders, including government?
Yeah, look, I think the approach varies on what objective you're trying to achieve. So Tech Central is really about digital enablement. It's about the enabling technologies that we need, and so that's why there'll be an aggregation of tech companies. We know tech companies are particularly active in the startup sector and so forth. The work around the Aerotropolis and the AMRF around manufacturing will involve the nature of those companies, but potentially big manufacturers coming there because they have immediate access to high quality research and innovation and real talent coming from students from universities who will study there and work with other organisations. CSIRO is an anchor. What an opportunity that is to bring all of this together.
Professor Glover, you've with your UWS hat on, you're in just about every precinct, so you get to have a good insight into what works and what doesn't work, or the strengths and relative weaknesses of the different precincts. Putting you on the spot a little, you prepared to share some of your thoughts about these precincts and others within Western Sydney?
Yeah, no, I'm never short of a word on precincts in Western Sydney. And I agree with all the panel members. This is a really exciting time, I think, in Western Sydney. And listening to Glenn talk about Eastern Creek and what's the opportunities there, and potentially involving universities or TAFE, for example, I think is exciting. Lindy's given a great image of what we're planning to be part of in Campbelltown. Andrew's sort of indicated the strength around Tech Central, and when you're building off the strengths of the University of Sydney and UTS and the proximity in Ultimo. But you tend to have three sorts of emerging precincts in a way. You get the sort of thing at Tech Central where you've had this historic, strong higher education presence, and you can build off that with investment from industry and government to really create a real vibrancy on scale, and that's what you see around Tech Central, there's no doubt about that. Then you have government investment that brings about precinct opportunities and focus, and we're seeing that with the health investments. So I think it's very important to note the enormous investment being made by the New South Wales government into health infrastructure. And when you have Campbelltown Hospital undergoing generational change, when you have this at Westmead, and you've got it at Blacktown, and you've got it at Penrith with Nepean, and the list goes on, this is extraordinary change. It leverages massive investment by the government, and those precincts are precincts where universities and industry want to participate. So we're having that government investment. That's being reflected as well in the AMRF, the Advanced Manufacturing Research Facility, another $260 million investment by government. So driving a precinct at Bradfield based on government investment and focus around advanced manufacturing. And you've got the RNA pilot facility announced that will go to North Ryde. Now that's a $215 million investment to future-proof New South Wales in relation to pandemics and new technologies around RNA. So that's exciting, driven by government, major investment, building very focused capability to attract industry. Then you've got these wonderful emerging opportunities. And I count Campbelltown as an example of that. Very different geographically, as Lindy said. I think that's a strength for Campbelltown. It's got this community and justice precinct, our campus, the wonderful things happening in collaboration at the hospital. So you get a really interesting spread of the precinct in Campbelltown. Liverpool, different again. Liverpool Innovation Precinct. I know Amanda was on an earlier panel. Great things happening there, but the proximity of the hospital to the CBD is a unique aspect of the geography of Liverpool. Gives it a great opportunity, perhaps with a med-tech focus. Then you've got Westmead, one of the biggest hospitals in the Southern Hemisphere. Great opportunity with the University of Sydney. If anything, they've got to move forward their developments and time frame. We're investing heavily at Westmead. That precinct is a lighthouse precinct alongside Tech Central and Bradfield. So we've never had a time like this. So the infrastructure investment's going in, and it's complemented by the transport infrastructure. So metro is critically important to this. That has to be, I know government have plans over the next decade. That's going to be crucial to get connectivity. We've heard the word used quite a few times here. We need to get that connectivity. The airport, Nancy Bird-Walton, Amy talked about it. How crucial is that going to be in 2026 to actually light up our precincts? Because it'll bring the international connection so much closer through that airport. So we've got a really exciting time ahead of us. I'm not criticising any of the precincts because I think the local government, the Parkland City Authority, the work that's being done on the central city. I'm doing a review at the moment for the Premier about making Parramatta a global city. And I'm looking at that in the context of what we need to do from Westmead through Parramatta to Sydney Olympic Park and some of the opportunities there. PLR2, Parramatta Light Rail 2, is an extraordinary commitment by government to open up that region right through to another precinct at Sydney Olympic Park because it lags as a precinct compared to Olympic legacy sites around the world. There's never been a more exciting time to be in Western Sydney. The investment is there. I think the partnerships and the collaboration, I mean, Andrew and I are working between UTS and Western Sydney University at our big development in Bankstown. When the government makes an announcement around the Bankstown Hospital, we'll then see a really interesting conversation about Bankstown and Georges River and Bayside, that whole region of the southern and southwestern part of Sydney. So we're in for an exciting decade ahead of us. And I think one of the things we probably need to do to finish on is to start thinking in a decadal way. Because we want to get through the transport and hospital infrastructure development, formulating the investment and delivering it around our precincts, and then go out beyond the airport by 5 years. When the airport's got 20 million passenger transits a year, what does that mean to Western Sydney and our precincts and our focus? It's a really exciting time.
But you talked about investment from government, significant investment from government, directly and indirectly. Where is the accountability, or should there be accountability? I mean, who oversees it all? Is it a master plan, or is it a set and forget, competing different precincts? How should it be how should the precincts be made accountable?
Well, I think that the precincts are naturally accountable in a sense. I mean, there are governance arrangements, and where you have the hospital precincts, you've got a strong connection to the LHD, whether it's Western Sydney LHD, Nepean Blue Mountains or South West Sydney. We've got 3 great LHDs in our region, and they are really driving a strong agenda for their hospital and education precincts, as Lindy said about the great opportunities in Campbelltown. So I think the accountability is there. We still need to see, I think, a greater coordination across government. I think West Invest is, I think, a good example of this. We're all watching very carefully this $5 billion investment by the state government into Western Sydney. The councils, naturally, are there putting forward proposals, infrastructure proposals for the $2 billion that's being rolled out initially, but there's another $3 billion to come. And that's the opportunity, I think, where we need to see government coordinating its investment and not being driven by particular priorities, but actually thinking holistically. You don't get many opportunities to drop $3 billion and to make those commitments before the end of the year. That needs to be coordinated, that needs to have the accountability, and we're looking for government to deliver on it.
I think a statement was made at the Tech Central Investment Forum earlier in the week that precincts do evolve organically. There's an element to which you can design the physicality of it and you can think about what it looks like, but there is going to be an organic piece. But then there's the nurturing of what you want to achieve, and that will require governance. And so there's something about incumbency, there's something about the people who have a place there and are running it, and then there's something about the mechanism by which you cultivate the collaborations that make sense to deliver the outcomes you want. As Barney said, plenty of collaborations across universities, with universities and companies, and those links. But it doesn't happen by accident, even with the structure of investment. So thinking carefully about a governance structure and a way of working that doesn't impede that sort of organic growth, but actually facilitates focus and outcome.
Just to add one thing to that, I think is a really important point to pick up on with Andrew. The Innovation and Productivity Council in New South Wales has done some great work on precincts over the last 5 years to really look internationally at what makes a precinct work, and governance is part of it. I mean, you look at a lot of tech parks around the world and they don't work. They're made up of isolated companies that never interact, and the universities have no presence. So we need to make sure that the amenity, the connectivity, the social interaction, all of the elements that make a precinct a place to work and live are reflected in the great precincts we're developing in Western Sydney.
And all the soft infrastructure is not just about the kit and the buildings and the amenity of the precinct. It needs a life, and without that attention to the life, you do end up with places that are just sterile. They're places where people do have work, and it's probably productive work, but you don't get the value add.
So we've got this conflict between sterile places allowing innovation to flourish, the need for governance control. Lindy, you're out of government. We've talked about the need for it, but have we got a model for it? How do we coordinate this? Should there be some kind of structure put in place at a state government level in conjunction with local government? Have you got any thoughts about ideas?
That's certainly what's happening in the evolution at Tech Central. So we know who's there, and to Barney's point, it is a different situation. So you have people who've been there for 180 years for Sydney University, and so there's an incumbency piece there. You've got people who've already committed significant investment, companies like Atlassian that are building a building on the precinct. You've got local government who has an agenda around a whole range of things, which includes those the culture and other life of the precinct and the accommodation and all the things that go around it. So there are natural people that will come together because they're there. But it can't stop at that. It's got to have the overlay of it being able to bring new partners, not to be a closed place. So somehow it needs that balance, and that's working out at the moment at Tech Central. And I imagine by the end of the year, we'll have some clarity about what that looks like, so that we can then start to trial some of the big initiatives that do require that machinery to be in place.
I think to add to that, I think Richard's here, so I know that Westmead is getting good governance in terms of looking at how all the partners come together to coordinate activities. So I think that's a great initiative at Westmead. And of course, we've got the Western Parkland City Authority in Bradfield and the work that's going on there. The AMRF is such an extraordinary first step for the government to take. So I think we're seeing the right sorts of governance arrangements emerging. I'm just concerned that we get the coordination across all levels of government, so we get the right infrastructure in the right places at the right time. Nancy Bird Walton has to have the right connectivities. It's such an important piece of the puzzle.
Lindy?
Look, I couldn't agree more with Barney. The coordination makes or breaks a precinct.
But how does the coordination happen? I mean...
Look, in our experience, we had to initiate it ourselves. And sometimes you need to do that. Government's very busy on a variety of priorities. For us, we were very passionate about the fact that we are the fastest growing region in Australia. So we can't just sit back and wait for it to happen, because that will be a disastrous outcome for community. We had a very set agenda. We need to create more local jobs. We need to stop people from having to get on a train. And we need to give back people quality of life, and that's a real motivator for us. So we couldn't just rest on our laurels and wait for government to come to us. They've got a very big task with Bradfield, but I agree with Barney. I mean, if you don't have connectivity to those significant investments, then it's really pointless, because if you can't get to the airport, then you're not getting the advantage of the innovation that's created there. So I think the prioritisation needs to be made around some very key principles, and growth needs to be one of them, and connectivity. And then you go with the soft infrastructure. The soft infrastructure is what local government's really good at, because we know our people. And I think what we're trying to develop more and more is respecting each other's role, whether it be a university, whether it be a hospital, whether it be state and federal government. We each have a role to play, and respecting those roles. And I think from a local government perspective, you can't go past the fact that we know the day-to-day challenges and opportunities for our communities and our cities. So that collaboration and coordination is really critical from my perspective.
And you're getting enough support from the state government? You talked about Bradfield. A lot of federal government, state government funding. Are you feeling a bit isolated, left alone?
Brian, I'm trying to focus on solutions.
I'm meant to be a provocateur, so...
Look, it's challenging. I think government has a really big challenge in front of it in terms of infrastructure need. I'm probably famous for saying Campbelltown won't use the new Western Sydney Airport because we can't get there. We don't have a rail connection. And if you can jump on a train with your suitcase and go straight to Sydney Airport, why are you going to catch 3 trains to get to your own airport?
So you're going it alone?
No, we're not going it alone. I think, to be fair, the Western Sydney Authority has been fantastic. The city deal opportunity has been great to work more closely with state and federal government. I think they've just got a huge challenge on their hands. Transport is a significant investment that makes things successful. Do we have enough of that in the Macarthur region? No, absolutely not. We don't. But we have great investment in our wonderful Campbelltown Hospital that will generate... It is our largest employer in Campbelltown Hospital. I was making it a local government hospital there for a second. And we're very fortunate for that. But it's not enough. Yeah. You know, we need a lot more white-collar jobs because we have 3,000 people leave our city a day to work for government in Sydney and Parramatta. Now, that's just not an ideal situation. People are travelling 3 hours a day in commutes. That's not quality of life. That's not good for mental health. That's not good for domestic violence. It's not good for a whole range of things. So, yes, it's a significant challenge, but we all need to own it. We all need to own that challenge. So I think it shouldn't be who yells the loudest or who's got
But that helps, probably.
Yeah, look, advocacy is critical.
Yeah.
Politics, in an ideal world, should take a back seat, and we should actually focus on the facts in front of us. But I can say that because I'm not allowed to be involved in the politics, fortunately. But I think that I do worry about MacArthur. I do really worry about it because it is the fastest growing region in Australia, and I think it needs a hell of a lot more investment. But that's me advocating, not whinging.
Advocating very well. Glenn, are you getting enough support from government?
Yeah, well, I think we are. I think there's a couple of things. I think our governance model is a bit simpler than what Lindy deals with. I mean, we're part of the Greater Sydney Parklands. We're the one precinct, and it covers Sydney Motorsport Park and the drag strip and the new speedway. So there's been a precinct master plan that's developed. So in terms of the governance model, it's fairly simple. I've got to be honest, I don't think we get good enough support from our local government. And I'll give you an example because I'm still, a little annoyed about it. If you want to talk about West Invest, for example, so we put in for some projects that I think are tremendous. I tried to get some support from local government. It was Blacktown Council. Hope somebody's here from there now. And they refused to give us a letter of support because they're in competition. They've got 55 projects and they think that they won't support anybody else within the LGA for their projects because that's competition for them. So you want to be provocative, I'm happy to go along with it. I think it's a disgrace. Here's a world-class precinct that the local government doesn't want to support because it's in competition, yet we're within their LGA.
I need to pop in there for a minute because I'm not
Defending
local government, but we can only work within a system that we work within. So the West Invest criteria and the way they've done it, again, as I said earlier, it creates competition, which isn't healthy because you do need the collaboration. And every local government area is going to handle that differently. I guess for us, because we've had to work with 7 other local government areas, we think about regional outcomes and we work collaboratively. In fact, we had the opposite problem. The 8 of us tried to put in a project that we thought would be amazing, but we couldn't do it because we didn't have our own ABN.
Can I just add I'm not going to bag government here. We've all heard various ministers, Mr Ayres, Mr Henskins and others say government have a role, but it's not the only role. And I think we just need to be attuned to that. We're not forming a government department here to drive innovation, the Department of Precinct Innovation. What we are doing here is forming a community of stakeholders who all have skin in the game. So government absolutely has a role. It has a role around some of the policy drivers that are needed. It has the significant economic stimulus. It has certainly made its commitments to seed funding. Sure, more can be done in certain areas, but the precincts are not going to work if it's just run by government. It actually has to be a shared agenda. That's why governance becomes important. That's why the models of engagement and collaboration become important. Otherwise, we might as well drop the word innovation here because that's not where it's going to end up.
All right, thank you, everyone, and thanks to our panel. We've run out of time, but I think we've obviously highlighted some challenges, but I think you'd all agree that there was a lot of excitement about what can be done as a collective in terms of what the precincts can deliver in terms of benefits, not only for the precincts and the areas in which they operate, but more importantly for the community around them. So would you all join me in thanking our panellists?